Good morning. We are going to begin our 3.4 lesson. I want to give you a content warning that our history will be about racism and violence. Okay, so if you need to take time to pause, that's fine, but it will be some harsh realities. Right now, you should have done your 3.4 do now. Now we'll be doing our notes. Our lesson objective today is that we are going to evaluate why slavery was justified, meaning why was it given, why was it a choice? Why was it right at that time? And we're also going to understand what the slave trade triangle was and how it worked. So the slave trade triangle was they went from Europe, they went here to Africa. This is where they picked up the enslaved people and they did their trading. And then they went, after they picked up those people, they them off here in South America, here in the islands, and here in North America. And this is us right here. All right, so these are our vocabulary: industrial, commercial, Atlantic slave trade, a route in which enslaved were traded for resources and used. The Middle Passage, when you hear me say that, it is this passage right here is called the Middle Passage. It was one of the longest passages, and it's where they were forced enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World. Okay, checkpoint number 1. What do you think we mean when we describe someone as an enslaved person? I'm going to give you some time to think about that. So, what is slavery? Well, some of us are asking this, right? Well, a slave is someone who is owned by another person. A slave has no freedom, no money, and no choice. A slave has to do what is asked of him by his master. Usually, this is work of some kind. Slaves are punished for not following their master's orders if they're working too slowly or attempting to run away. Again, this happened in the time when there was an industrial rising, so it was for commercial use. At the time, there was no machines, so people who were enslaved were the ones who were like the machines. There were 3 reasons as to why slavery happened. 1 was the beliefs. People had strong beliefs of who were chosen to be slaves. 2, religion. Believe it or not, religion played a big part of why slavery was allowed. And 3, money, for economic reasons, for economic gaining. Again, we are talking about an agricultural economy, right? This is how the big countries grew, because each country had their own set of economic value. So, how did they make it across the sea? Well, this was called the slave trade triangle. We have Britain, West Africa, and the North America and the West Indies. And Britain had commercial goods or industrial goods, but wanted sugar and tobacco. America had sugar and tobacco, but wanted workers. Africa had people, but wanted industrial goods. So you can see how this economic trade-off was happening. They said, hey, you have that, we can give you the people, right? And just imagine countries were at this time wanted to grow, and unfortunately it's such an ugly way of thinking, but this is what humanity did. So checkpoint number 2. On your handout, on your checkpoint number 2, you are going to look at all the reasons people use to justify slavery. Then you're going to write the categories: beliefs, religion, or economic underneath. I'm going to give you my example. So, first one is done for you. The Bible talks about slavery. To some people believed this meant slavery was okay. Which category does it belong to? Beliefs, religion, or economic? The Bible, obviously, religion. Slave owners thought the slaves were not like humans. They were more like dogs or horses, and that white people were superior, which meant better. That's a belief. That's an opinion. Here's another one. Slaves could be sold for $1,200 each. So people who bought them from Africa could make lots of money. What belief would that be? I'm sorry, what category would that be? Beliefs, religion, or economic? If you thought of economic, ding 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 ding, you are correct. Economic. All right. What were the clues that it was economic or about money? Sold. I see money. I see money. That tells me that the category belongs to economic. So now you're going to do the rest on your own. That's for checkpoint number 2. Let's go back to our lesson. Okay. Next, we have, what was the transatlantic slave trade? What was that about? Well, the slave trade, think about, we don't have, back then there were no freeways, right? There were no streets. So they traveled by boat. And there were three journeys. Here's the first journey. It went from Britain to Africa. Britain carried goods to Africa. Second, we have the Middle Passage from Africa to the Americas, which carried the African slaves or enslaved people. And then finally, third, we have the Homeward Passage. And this is where they went from the America and they took it to Britain. So after they dropped off the Africans there, they picked up the sugar, the tobacco, the rum, the rice, the cotton, and the other goods, and they took it back to Britain, right? So again, Europe to Africa, that's number 1. And then we have 2, known as the Middle Passage. Boom. This is where they dropped off the people. And then 3, we have the raw materials. So after they dropped them off, they trade and they took them back to Europe. The sugar, the cotton, the tobacco, and rice, all the other goods that Europe needed at the time. Sugar back in the day was a commodity. It was a luxury. Sugar was what everybody wanted. And so that was in high demand. Here's another picture again of why it's called the transatlantic slave trade. You can see from Britain, they drop off the cloth, the guns, they give it to the West Africa, they take the guns, all of the alcohol, right? The iron, which makes iron here is what makes hard things, right? Like weapons, things like that. And so they give them, not give them, but basically they steal them, they capture them, they steal them, they give them to the whites, and then they take them to this Middle Passage, which lasted about 3 months, people. 3 months in the ocean. And then they drop them off here, and then they take the stuff, the goods, and they take it back. And this is how it went. It went on for years. So now we're going to be reading this account, which is a primary source of the experience of what it was like inside the Middle Passage. And in this section, we have it on your notes. This is checkpoint number 3. This is checkpoint 3. I should have written it here. Okay. Let's make this smaller so we can see. And so in this checkpoint, we're going to read this. We're going to take notes. While I'm reading, you're going to take notes, okay? So I saw many of my miserable countrymen chained together. Miserable means horrible. They were chained together. Some chained means that they were tied, some with their hands tied behind their backs. We were taken to a place near the coast, and I asked the guide why we were here. So that means they had no idea. They were covered. This told me that they were confused. He told me, let's move this because I can't read. Okay, there we go. He told me that I was to learn the ways of the white-faced people. He took a gun, so the white-faced people meant enslaved owners. He took a gun, some cloth, and some metal in exchange for me. This tells me that they were in the first passage from Britain to Africa where they exchanged clothes, gun, and metal to take the Americas. And I don't want to use the word exchange. I want to use where they were sold. They were sold. They were seen as like materials. And this made me cry bitterly. I was then taken to a ship where I saw my fellow captives moaning and crying. This whole experience was dehumanizing and makes me feel so horrible and question how can people treat innocent people this way. And this was just one account. There's several accounts out there that you can find online and like libraries. But this is a one way that you can see how you can only imagine what the middle passage was like. We already did this checkpoint. So summary. To wrap this all up, the transatlantic slave trade was how the enslaved people came about to all these different parts of the world. There were 3 passages. We had 1, 2, and 3. It was a legal system. It was not illegal. This was a right that colonizers had in order to grow their country. This was influenced by 3 by 3 categories: beliefs, religion, and for economic reasons to gain profit. Not only was it disgusting, but it was dehumanizing. It was dehumanizing because it took away from the dignity of these people who had no choice but to be part of that system. All for the economic gain of these colonizers. To final this up, I want you to do your checkpoint number 4. First, how did today's lesson help you learn more what you already know about the history of slavery? What did this lesson teach you about the origin of slavery became a legal system? This is asking what did this lesson teach you of how slavery happened? And finally, the last one, what info was hard for you to process and what are your questions and reactions so far? That concludes our lesson for 3.4. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And if you have any questions, please ask me, okay? Bye.